Hello, hello. Welcome to season 5 of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. I see way too many business people letting their businesses or their jobs run their lives versus them figuring out with real clarity about what they want their lives to look like and having their job or their business be the conduit to have that life that they absolutely love. I want to thank you so much for listening in to season 5. This season is filled with motivation, inspiration, leadership, and wisdom from some super interesting guests, and myself included. My hope is through our shared experiences, you will see a bit of yourself and move further into leading your own lit up life. If you're enjoying this podcast, please feel free to share with others and leave a rating, and a comment or two would be awesome too. Let's get going. Thanks again for being a part of our community.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I am here today with Raydeane Owens, and this podcast, not to set you up, Raydeane, but this is going to be a podcast that you don't want to miss. So if you don't have time to listen to the whole thing, that's okay. Listen to parts of it and come back to it. I just am imagining this to be a really joy-filled podcast. And Raydeane and I met through a networking group that I have started to attend in Coeur, which is about 45 minutes from me. And she spoke, and there, Raydeane, you just intrigue me because I know why there's this light, right? We're both believers, and you just have this like radiating joy from you. And that just intrigues me because for me, it seems like the world needs more joy, right? Like what the world needs now is more love. And you just exude that. And so I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself professionally, because as you know, and we spoke about, I think you would do a much better job at that than me. But tell us who you are and what you do to show up in the world, and then let's have a conversation.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. And I was excited to be at that event, Women of Impact. My name is Raydeane. I am a local pastor. My husband and I started a church 16 years ago. Heart of the City Church. That was a great risk in our life, and risk always do a lot of things in our lives. We really get to know each other, or get to know ourselves and each other. I'm also a author. 2 years ago, I published my first book, and since then I've published another one. So that's opened up a whole new arena for me. I love the church and I love the city, and I'd like to see them connect a lot more. And so that's my passion. That's why I was so excited to be there, to be invited. And I'm been married for 32 years. I have 2 grown children. They're both married. They've given me 4 grandchildren so far. They're all boys. My youngest, my daughter, just had twins a month ago. And so that's a little bit about who I am. I love women. I grew up in a household full of women. My mom was a single mom for years, and I have 3 sisters. And so I found myself surrounded by women most of my life, and I absolutely love it.
That's fantastic. So Raydeane, like you're here now. Give us a little bit of like, have you lived in Coeur d'Alene or North Idaho all of your life, or did you transplant here from somewhere and decide to let me back up. Tell us a little bit about what got you to Coeur d'Alene.
Okay.
And what were some of the deciding factors for you and your husband to come start a church? Because that's not just hey, let's go do this. Right? Like there's
no. I am going to start with, I'm a native Idahoan. I think that was compelling about me coming back here. I was born and raised in Lewiston, Idaho. I lived in there until I was about 19. And then I was working with a clothing company, J. Jacobs, and my manager, I was the assistant manager, and she's like, hey, I see potential in you at 19. I'm like, no, I just want to sell clothes. No, I see potential in you. I want you to go through this management training program, did all that. And then I was offered these stores, and I thought, okay, let's move. Let's go open a store somewhere else. And so I opened a J. Jacobs store in Eureka, California at 19 years old. What was I thinking? But
Wow.
it led into this amazing new arena of my life, something I think I'd been searching for my whole life. But I didn't know it. I was raised Catholic. I lived 2 blocks from the Catholic Church. I went to Catholic school, but I never had a really deep relationship with Jesus. I always felt like he was afar off, and actually didn't know how much I trusted him, because I would be in the Catholic Church and he was bleeding on the cross. And I thought, he doesn't look
Yeah.
like he can help me. But when I moved to Eureka, I started having all these different relationships with people. One of them was a pretty good looking guy that kept inviting me to church. And so I eventually said, I didn't say yes to church. I said, I'm Catholic. I don't need to go to your church. But I said yes to a small group, like a Bible study he was having. And boy, oh boy, did that transform my life. I was 21 by that time. I was intrigued by the community that was happening. There was about 40 people my age in this room connecting, like really connecting like I had never seen before. That was very attractive to me. And then I heard the gospel message in a smaller group. I'd heard scripture, I'd heard about Jesus in the Catholic Church. There's something totally different about being in community with people and having them
Yeah.
share experiences. And so by the end of that group, I made a decision. Yes, I want Jesus to be my personal Lord and Savior, not just a guy that I go visit once a week or call upon when I'm having a difficult time. And it really changed the trajectory of my whole life. And I tell you that story. I know I'm telling a long story, but it's all connected. And I told you that earlier, that
Yeah.
I believe the things that we do are very connected with the experiences that we've had throughout our life. And so that good looking guy that invited me to the Bible study eventually asked me to marry him. And I had kind of said in my very independent self when I moved to California, I'm never getting married and I'm never having kids. Ask my sisters. I was the one to be like, I'll babysit your snotty kids. I'm not getting married. I'm going to do all these things. I was studying English in college. I was going to be in news. I was going to go interview people in foreign lands. But here I find myself 21 years old, giving my heart to Jesus, saying yes to a guy I'd only known a year, that I'll marry you. So I got married when I was 23. Once I gave my heart to the Lord, I started to go to his church. It was very different than the church I was used to. But I was very, again, drawn by the community. I was drawn by getting invited into people's houses, these families that were opening up their lives to me. And I started helping out with the youth group. I was very drawn to young people. I had been somewhat of a troubled youth, as most of us are. And I was very drawn to just walking alongside of them. It's kind of that theory of being the person that you needed in your life. I started to feel all this redemption in my life from not having a real good mentor when I was young, by actually doing it for these young kids. And so I was just volunteering. I'm a new Christian. I'm loving on the kids. But when my husband and I, Jonathan, got married, the church said, hey, these kids love you guys. Would you consider being the youth pastors? And I was like, oh, you don't want me to be the youth pastor. I do not have strong biblical knowledge. But again, it was that they trusted us out of this just sincere love and the connection that we had with the
You
kids.
gotta,
So changed the trajectory of my life. All of a sudden, I find myself a youth pastor in California. And we were there 7 years and just grew in the Lord and grew our youth group and grew these little kids, that were so confused about who they were, and giving them a sense of really who they are and who Jesus is in their life. And then we moved from there to Boise, Idaho. I was getting back to my roots. I was happy. My husband was very attracted to Idaho too. He's a South Carolinian, so it could have gone either way on either side of the United States. But he's a hunter. He loved Idaho. So we moved to Boise. We were on staff there as youth pastors, again, just getting to love on these kids and getting involved, and me growing in Jesus along with these young people. We were there for 6 years. We had our kids when we lived in California too. So I left California with a newborn and a 2-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And Boise. So our kids are growing up, and after Boise, we served at a church in Vancouver, Washington. He was a good friend of ours and had been a mentor in our lives from afar. He'd call in, check in on us, and he told us that he was starting a church, and we're like, we need to come and just serve you and thank you for all you put in our lives. So just tell us what to do and we'll do it. We served him for 7 years. And at that point, my husband really felt like we need to do this. We need to go somewhere foreign and just dig into the ground with a pile of people who love Jesus and see what we can do. See if we can bring Jesus to a city. And so we moved to Coeur, Idaho. So 2 hours away from my hometown. So my sisters all live here in the Coeur area, and my
Nice.
mom lives 2 hours away. So we are literally back home. Our kids have met their spouses here and have their kids here. This is home. We've been here 16 years and we absolutely love it. And we hope and pray that we have made an impact for the good on the city of Coeur.
Well, I think you have. And I kind of want to go back. I don't know if you knew this, but I was a youth pastor for 9 years.
You mentioned
while I was-
that, and I thought, oh, there's more to this woman's story. I need to hear her story.
And I just love it too, because I always I think about Sarah and like her tent, right? Like, and how I have one child, and similar, I always said I never wanted to get married, never wanted to have children, right? And do all these things. But like now I have multiples that are adults and having children now, right? And that's just a special place in my heart. And I don't know about you, but one of the things I loved, well, a couple of things I loved about being a youth pastor is, one, it kept me young.
Yeah.
And second was like, in serving them, like I learned so much from them. Like, I think what I find, my opinion is that we discredit the youth of the world. The youth of the world are smart. They are deep, like they loved, for the most part, right? Like, I'm making a gross overgeneralization here, but the kids I came in contact with, they wanted to go deep. They wanted answers. They wanted to talk about the things that a lot of times adults in the church wouldn't even talk about.
Absolutely.
And I found that so refreshing. And it was just like, I look at that, and anytime I hear somebody kind of knock down a generation, I'm like, whoa, back up, right? Because the baby boomers that are getting ready to leave right now, the workforce, those were the 70s wild childs, right? Like those were the hippies, and they created the system. So like, just be patient and let them come into their own. But I don't know about you, but like, to me, that just brought so much joy, like getting deep into these conversations, just life.
I was so amazed. In fact, I mean, I just believe that God kind of sets us in the place he wants us. Like in Genesis, when he set the stars in the sky, he was so intentional. How much more each one of us? And that causes me to live a lot more intentionally, that I'm just not randomly doing something, that he's actually setting me in places. He has something for me to do. And I was so amazed. I was so surprised working with youth. They taught me how to parent. I was like, what not to do. This is what you should do. And I just learned so much. Like you said, they're so bright. They're so inquisitive. They're so not into any BS, which helped me keep away from that. It's like, you need to come, Raydeane. You need to be more vulnerable. You need to be transparent. I love reverse mentoring. I'm like, almost everybody I meet with, I'm like, hey, we're here to just help each other. I met with a young adult yesterday, a guy that had asked to meet with me, which is a little unconventional. I'm like, there's plenty of guy pastors at the church. No, I want to meet with you. Some of the people at the church call me Mama Ray. He goes, I need to meet with a mama. And I go, okay, fair enough. Let's meet. I'm telling you, blown away. This is a guy a year ago that came into the church, didn't want to live anymore, had told several people, I don't want to live anymore. And he just really dug into God, dug into the word, got rid of some of the confusion that was causing him to not want to live anymore, discovered he's all that in a bag of chips. I mean, the guy is amazing. Maybe had never been told that.
Yeah.
And he just began to talk to such depths. He's a writer. He had written all these poems. I had to ask him to stop so many times while we were meeting, like, stop, say that again. That was so profound. And so, and I just get to do that. That's basically what I do, is I get to meet with people. I get to connect them to their destiny, their identity, if they're confused, encouraging them, cheering them on. Come on, we all need a good cheerleader, and helping untie knots when there's things that go on. I don't know everything, but I certainly love people. And I met with enough people that we can together come up with some solutions or some baby steps to get them out of funks that they're in, or setbacks, or whatever it might be. It's a really beautiful thing I get to do.
Yeah. And I love that. Like, it just radiates from you. And the big thing that I keep picking up with you is community and connection. And right now, like, it feels like the world just needs so much of that community and connection, because for the last 2 or 3 years, with all of the things that went on, it just feels like there's been a separation, right? And reconnecting with people. And, I love it when I hear last night, I was here with a women's group and we were doing some things for a tree that we're doing for a nonprofit organization. And she's like, oh yeah, the tickets are sold out and we already have a wait list, because people are wanting that connection. And it feels like that's a really big piece of potentially why you do what you do. So why do you do what you do?
I am fascinated by people. I love challenges. I love to live in risky situations, and there's no greater risk than being intimately involved in people's lives. I found it fascinating. I've learned a lot about myself in the process, that for the same reason somebody absolutely loves me is the same reason another person actually does not like me at all, for the exact same reason. So you get real secure and like, well, okay, this is how God fashioned and formed me. Not everybody's going to like me. And it's kind of cool to get into the challenge of getting around people that are not like you. That leads to what has happened these last 3 years, Debbie. It is mind blowing that a pandemic, I would love to pick the brains of the people that went through the Spanish flu and the Black Plague. Did what happened to us happen to you? Because what I saw, you would think that during that time of being separated, that we would just so want to find new avenues for us to connect at a deeper level. And I saw some of that, but what I saw overarching was people forming these little groups saying, this is our group, this is what we stand for. And if you don't believe like we do, we're not going to play with you. We're not even going to talk to you. In fact, cancel culture, we're going to totally cut you off. Another thing that is a mark in my life is that God will usually have me go through something so that I have something actually substantial to say to someone else. Now, him and I argue about that. I'm like, I don't want to go through this. Just give me a book, give me a teaching, and I'll help that person. No, it's usually I go through it. So during the pandemic, I had, I witnessed that firsthand, that cancel culture. Simultaneously, I had a family member that lives a different lifestyle, that we had always been in great relationship. But then all of a sudden during the pandemic, if I didn't believe just like him and affirm everything he stood for, that we weren't going to be in a relationship anymore, he tried to break up with me. And I was like, okay, just so you know, Debbie, I'm a hard person to break up with. I will chase you. My parents were divorced when I was young. I might have a chip on my shoulder, but I'm like, you are not walking away from me unless we have duked it out to the bitter end and it's just not going to work out. So I'm still in process with that person. I was shocked that after showing how much I loved him for 8 years, that during the pandemic, all of a sudden it was okay to just cut off people that are not like you. And then simultaneously I had a good girlfriend in the Black community in Portland that just kind of sent me all these, hey, you need to do these 4 things or you're not going to be in my life anymore. And some of them were doable: donating to a Black defense cause, reading a book on white fragility. I have no problem with that. I love to learn. There's a problem, I admit. But it was kind of just the way she came at me that, hey, we're not going to be friends anymore if you don't do these things. And a couple of things she asked me to do, I'm not going to do. She asked me to email some of my pastor friends, telling them they're white supremacists and they need to bring it. And I'm like, no, you know who I am. That's why we became friends. I'm not going to do these things. But we were able to work through those things and have dialogue and have a really, really tight relationship again. And so I personally saw what was happening, but in a larger picture, I was like, guys, we have never all thought alike. Did you think sometime we all were alike? Why all of a sudden now can we not sit down at the same table? Because it's the same story. It's just a new situation. So I'm very passionate about that, about let's sit down, let's talk, we don't have to all be like, that's what makes the world go round, is that's how we learn, is getting around people that think and believe differently than us.
Yeah, it's interesting, Raydeane, because we'll talk about this here in a second. I have a belief, like core wounds, right? Like people feel unlovable or they feel unworthy. And I think we have a self-worth epidemic. Like, I think that's bigger than drugs. That's bigger than weight problems, because when you don't feel worth it, you don't feel loved, then that's when those other things happen. Right? Like, because we're stuffing food. And so obesity, we're trying to numb out with drugs, or we say, this is my little corner because I feel safe here and it's the well-worn path. And I don't want anybody to come into that doesn't believe the same way. And so it's refreshing to hear you say, how you went about processing and reconciling, really, because it's about, for me, I always feel like I work a lot in the universal laws, and the universal law of polarity, right? You can't have happy without sad. And
Right.
so for me, it's like, there's this forgiveness and reconciliation, right? Like they come hand in hand. And so that's something that is promising, that, and I forgot the original question I was going to ask you anyway, but like that's promising. And I think, to me, that's part of why people are drawn to you, is that you don't BS people. You say, let's get to the heart of something. And what I hear you saying too, and this is how I try to show up in the world too, is that for me, it's not my job to try to convince you to believe.
Right. No way.
And I just need to live my life in a way that people are attracted to that and ask questions.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the difference between throwing out a fishing hook with a worm on it and fishing versus having my 22 chasing you down. Right. Yeah. And I see that happen so much. And in this world of divisiveness right now, it feels like there's a big shift getting ready to come. I work in this Theory U, and I teach at Gonzaga. As a matter of fact, I'm heading there next week to do an immersion about Theory U that talks about something's dying, and then you're present, and you're in presencing, and then something's emerging. And as a collective world, like we've done this before, like when you said the Spanish flu, like we've done this before in the States, and like England had their own version of it, and like Europe and different places had different seasons of that as well. But for the first time, we've been opened up to this worldwide collective, something's dying, and almost like the revolutions that we've had, like we are in this state of presencing, and something's getting ready to emerge. And it'll be really interesting to me to see, like, I can't wait. I'm a data nerd, so I can't wait 10 years from now to read like all the data research that's been done on like what happened with connection and self-worth and empathy and compassion during this time. Because it reminds me actually of, have you seen that Heineken commercial where they have, if not, everybody that's listening, Google this commercial. It is one of my favorites. And I think you can just Google like Heineken put together a bar commercial. And what happens is you have these people that are on two opposite ends of the spectrum, and they don't realize it. And they give them these questions to talk about, and they start talking about and getting to know each other really well. And then they give them this project, and they start to put the things together. And then there's two Heineken beers sitting on the bar, and they play the video of like, I don't understand transgender, and this is ridiculous, and blah, 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 blah. And I don't like this, blah, 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 right? Like they show the video of these people being extremely opinionated about the opposite of each other. And they said, now you have a choice. You can get up and walk away, or enjoy a beer and talk about it.
That is so deep. This is a beer commercial we're talking about. I'm
Yes.
Googling. I haven't seen it. And how did they do that in a 30-second video?
Well, it's a couple minutes, but I still watch it. I still get goosebumps just talking about it. Because to me, that's what the world needs right now, right? This ability to sit down and have a conversation without taking offense, being inquisitive and curious, and finding out, okay, what do you believe about this? And how can we like work together to really hit a core issue of people feel unloved?
Yeah. And again, it goes back to that question of why. Why do you believe that way? What has led you down that path? And that's where the compassion comes in, because if you can get someone to open up and tell their story, it makes so much more sense why they could get in these positions that they're in. And when compassion is at the table, oh my gosh, it's then you can actually learn from each other, even if you're different. I have some nieces and nephews that are all college age that have some very big ideas. And I have a couple of them, they're not all super happy that their aunt is a pastor, and they're not into it at all. But I have a couple of them that are just willing to sit down with me and pick my brain and why I believe the way I do. And then I listen to them. And then we both came to this place, like I've learned a lot from them. And then because of some of the research I've done, they're like, thank you for like explaining that. I don't usually go down that rabbit hole because I don't believe that way, but thank you, for sharing that with me. And it's just profound. It's profound what we can do when we show a little compassion and listen to someone's story.
Absolutely. We've really gone from, I talk about the 4 levels of listening. We've really gone from like a level 2 and 3 listening down to a level 1, where it's like, I want my opinion known and that's all. And I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to hear you. And when we don't hear heard, we don't feel loved.
Mm-mm.
And
No.
so, yeah.
We don't truly know who someone is.
Absolutely.
Hear them. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we make a lot of judgments based on what we see and just an initial one-line conversation. And yeah, that's sad to me, but I also think there's hope in this, right? I call it surfing the edge of chaos, because chaos energy isn't always bad, but there's a lot of chaos energy right now going around, and it's a matter of, surfing on that. And I'm not all like toxic positivity, but there is joy, right? Like, and we have to make the conscious choice to choose joy.
Yeah. I have found too that I develop the most. I want to be a lifelong learner. I'm not 55 and like I know everything now. And where I have experienced the most growth is the more uncomfortable the situation, the more I grow. And so
your growth.
You just need to get used to being uncomfortable.
Yep. I say that all the time. So Raydeane, I could talk for hours with you, and we're going to after the holidays, but you are actually my first guest too, by the way, in 2023. So some of you are hearing me saying about the holidays, and the holidays will be over by the time you hear this. But if, like, kind of as a last parting piece to people, if you could say like one thing, other than having your faith, one thing that you feel like serves you well, that potentially if other people, like you would invite other people into trying, what would you say that would be?
Well, I think it's more of not trying something, but focusing on something. I have kept my whole life a focus on my family. And again, that came out of my experiences. I come from a divorced household, and then my mom remarried, and it was a mixed household. And so I'm pretty passionate about family. And that's the second thing besides my faith. And in my first book, Heaven and Earth, I talk about these majors of my life. It's like my faith, my family, and my friends. So those are my 3 main focuses. And yeah, just encouraging people to make decisions that impact their family for the good. I sit down with so many families because their young adult kids are going off and doing things that they're uncomfortable with. They don't know how to have a relationship with them. So just pursuing relationship with our family, getting to know them. Oh my gosh, my kids are now these grown adults my son's a pastor at the church, and I'm like, I want you to be my pastor. Like, you're amazing. And where is all of this stuff coming from? So getting to know your kids, getting into their world, no matter how uncomfortable it is. I would encourage people to do that. I think we just have our kids and we have our spouse, but putting value back into that, about how cool is it that, my husband is one of my friends, that my kids are these amazing people that I want to sit down and have coffee with because I learn from them. I'm watching my daughter go through what she did. I'm like, every time I'm over there, I'm at a loss for words. I'm like, you're my hero. You're my hero. How are you doing this? How are you doing this? So yeah, I would encourage people that way.
I hear gratitude there. I hear gratitude.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And also just focusing on every little thing. Like, I think we get over encompassing and we get overwhelmed, and that's where all that comes from, is that this big, like everything's going to hell in a handbasket. But when you focus on, really who helped me with that was my grandkids. They slowed me so far down that I started noticing all these little simple things that brought so much joy, so much gratitude, so much perspective. Like, the world is not as bad as we all think, but we get these pervasive narratives that are out there. But what I think would be cool is if some of us that are maybe I love all the things you say. I want to know more about this class you teach at Gonzaga and dipping down in the dying and then the rebirth. I love all that. But if there's more of us that are painting that narrative, then I think it gives people a lot more hope and a lot more energy to wake up into a new day. And
that's what it's about. Yeah. So Raydeane, if someone wants to get a hold of you or learn more about you, and also I believe you're on Amazon.
Yeah.
The Heaven on Earth book is out on Amazon. So go check that out, buy your copy today. And but if somebody wanted to reach out to you, or they wanted to learn more about you and kind of what you do, where would you send them?
Well, our church has the website, theheartcda.com. And so you'll get my pastoral professional side there. And then I have a website, radiates.com. That's my author side and kind of some of the musings and inspiration there. And I have 2 books now, Heaven and Earth and Brave One. They're sold at Carousel Emporium, my favorite store in Sandpoint. And then,
okay, perfect.
Yeah, I'm sure you've been there. It's amazing. The owner's amazing there. And then downtown Coeur d'Alene, Mix It Up has them too. And the owner there, Beth Brown, is just amazing connections with women that I've made through this whole process too. So I'm pretty easily attainable. You can Google my name and there's all kinds of ways of getting a hold of me.
Perfect. And Raydeane, thank you for pointing out the local places to get your book to. I know I have listeners all across the United States and in New Zealand and other places too. And so I do appreciate though that, because I do have local listeners, because I'm a big firm believer in supporting local business. So thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah.
And with that, it's a wrap. See you guys next week. Thanks so much for listening. The song Ride is co-written and sung by Miss Jackie Wilson and her collaborators Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee. And a huge shout out to them for allowing us to use this perfect song. Everyone have a fabulous week, and I'll talk to you next week.